Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat. And, well, Horwat, what can we say? The Pittsburgh Penguins go out there and do the same exact thing that they did on Saturday, losing in overtime to the Philadelphia Flyers, this time by a final score of 2-1 in Philly at Wells Fargo Center. We have, I guess, stuff to talk about today. That they lose in the same exact ways. They play the same exact style of hockey. It's really hard to break much down, but we're going to try to do that for the next 40 to 45 minutes. We'll talk about the first line because it is carrying the Pittsburgh Penguins right now between that and the goaltenders, Alex Nedeljkovic and Tristan Jarry. We'll give you some injury updates, some positive news on that front from the Pittsburgh Penguins on Monday afternoon, and then we'll talk a little bit about a potential coaching change because we see that being a very busy topic of conversation across Penguins land. So we'll talk about, the positives and negatives, and will it make an effect, and will it make the effect that people are hoping it will, if that does occur. So we'll talk about that in the final segment. But let's start off with the first line because it continues to carry the Pittsburgh Penguins. Sidney Crosby scores the lone goal against Philly on Monday, becoming the NHL's leading goal scorer in the history against the Philadelphia Flyers, surpassing Mario Lemieux in that one. It's his 15th goal of the season, and he only trails Jake Gensel in the NHL for 5-on-5 points. Gensel has 25 this season. Sidney Crosby has 23. So when you look at the first line, obviously it's clicking on all cylinders, but everything else just seems to be struggling to get going.
That's putting it mildly, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
I think you were putting it best in your to go yesterday that the top line is doing its thing. This is what we expected from them, but it's not that everyone else is, they're all ice cold. The power play needs no introduction at this point anymore. It's hitting franchise lows. The second line has, even with Rickard Rakell, I don't think the second line has been moving the needle much lately. Riley Smith started off really well. Evgeny Malkin started off really well. Those two had that bond and that connection. While it still might be there, their finishing ability has just evaporated completely. And it doesn't matter who's on their other wing. Nothing seems to be waking them up anytime soon. Third line's a gong show, and I think in Penguins land, it not always has been, but it has been for a very long time now. It started with at least last season before. It's hard to find a consistent group for the third line. And the fourth line, really, right now, it's just injured. That fourth line is pinned together because all three ideal names are not in the NHL lineup right now. So just nothing much you could do with that scenario. So it's kind of hard to judge who's centering. It's kind of hard to judge Kopanen and then whoever he gets stuck with, which it seemed to be Harkins and Zahorna, who all three of them are not playing any minutes really. So it's hard to really give them any sort of opinion or thought because they're just not on the line. They're just not on the ice. So regardless, it's the first line carrying the team and the goaltending coming up huge. I would have thought that would have been the thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you look at the second line, and I think that's where the biggest issues lie for the Pittsburgh Penguins, because coming into the season, how much did you realistically expect, at least on the offensive side of the puck, to get out of the third and fourth line? Yeah, you said maybe they're going to be able to contribute here and there and somewhat here and there, and they have at points. I think it's a little bit lower when it comes to the grand total of scoring contributions than we would have expected, even with those low expectations. But the second line has just been dormant. And I mean, look no further than a 3-on-1 yesterday, headmanned by Evgeny Malkin. Typically, you're saying, hey, I would love to have Evgeny Malkin be the guy headmanning a 3-on-1. That's exactly who you want in that situation on the second line. Malkin doesn't shoot the puck. He doesn't pass the puck. Instead, he skates the puck behind the Philadelphia Flyers net. They don't get a shot on goal on it at all. He literally just wrapped it around the net and then went for a pass to the point. Yeah. What is that? Like, at this point, that's not, hey, you're unlucky. Hey, you're not getting the chances. Hey, you're not getting the breaks. That's mentally, you are just not there right now. And Evgeny Malkin just skating the puck around and going back to the point is a prime example of what is wrong with that line right now. It is that none of them have their heads in the game. There is no chemistry whatsoever between Riley Smith, and Drew O'Connor, and that is just a crazy statement to say at this point, considering what we were saying about Smith and Malkin specifically just 4 weeks ago. So, and it's been probably about 4 weeks since they've been able to actually score. At least Riley Smith has been able to score, because now he's gone 14 straight games without lighting the lamp.
14.
I mean, sorry, I just thought about this. Is it not Jason Zucker? Is it not what we had from Jason Zucker? Hey, wow, this guy is scoring. It looks great. And then all of a sudden, he's on a milk carton somewhere. It's exactly what you got from Jason Zucker the last couple of years. The only difference is I think Zucker was probably a little bit better at being physical and a little bit better. Sure. I don't want to say better defensively. Riley Smith's pretty good in his own zone, pretty responsible in his own zone, but you're at least getting more out of Zucker when it comes to what you're actually seeing in a game-to-game basis. Whereas a lot of Riley Smith's contributions come from basically, the small little plays that are good for the team, but it's hard to really pick out of a lineup.
It was really fun about, not fun, and what's really interesting about you saying this is just Jason Zucker again is what did we say about Riley Smith the entire offseason after we got him? He is a more consistent Jason Zucker.
Oh.
Well. It doesn't seem like that anymore now that that's the comparison we're drawing. It is quite literally Jason Zucker 2.0. In other words, we have to wait. At least he's healthier. Now he's just a healthier Jason Zucker, right?
Yeah.
Now we just have to wait 2 years for him to go off on a tangent, and then that be it for him in town, which I think, ironically, might line up with his contract anyway.
I think it does. Yeah.
Next year's his last year. So
no, well, he's got 1 year to make it happen.
The price tag is the same. I think they're the same age, are they not?
They're close to the same age.
Yeah. I mean, we thought we were getting a more consistent player. And maybe that consistency is still there. Maybe it is just that confidence thing between at least those two. Like I said, we really can't fully ingrain Drew O'Connor onto this line. We can't fully ingrain Alex Nylander onto that line. We can't really fully ingrain Rickard Rakell into that line. And I know he's been injured, but even when he's there, he has not moved the needle this year. So it's just between those two, Smith and Malkin. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is just a confidence thing for them, because I saw that 3-on-2 coming in. All right, here's a good chance for them to maybe build something. Or 3-on-1 even, whatever it may have been.
Yeah.
A good chance for them to really get something going, start something up, because those three haven't been phenomenal. They've been absent from everything. And a big goal on the road in front of a lot of orange and black, and timely no less. Was it the third period?
I believe it was a 1-1 game at that point, but
okay.
I don't know if it was the third period. I can't remember. I'm a little bit of like cold brain right now. I'm sick if you can't tell, but like I can't remember what period that was.
You're good. And for whatever reason, I'm barely awake right now, so this is gonna be a fun episode. But it was just very uncharacteristic Malkin, and we've seen plenty of characteristic Malkin over the years, especially this year. But something about taking a 3-on-1 and getting nothing to the point where you are behind the net, that's just uncharacteristic of Evgeny Malkin and of that line. And second I saw that happen, I essentially phoned it in for the game in my head. I said, that's nothing. If they're not even getting something, a shot on goal out of that, and you're feeding it back to your defenseman, this is over. Nothing's going to go right. You can maybe steal a point if Alex Nedeljkovic continues to steal saves, which he did until he didn't, but not much you can do on a 2-on-1. And also whenever you lose your man in overtime. Whoops.
And here's the thing that I thought yesterday, and this exact thought went through my head whenever Malkin took the puck behind the net. We don't need to keep harping on this, but this is just something I think would be interesting. When he took the puck behind the net, I said the difference in aggressiveness and of getting Malkin now versus that is the same net, maybe not the actual physical structure, but that is the same end that Evgeny Malkin took that slap shot from between the dots back in 2009.
Yeah.
And I was like, the aggressiveness is so far gone in this situation that it's like, it's not the same player, because when we think of Evgeny Malkin, is that not one of the first plays that comes to your mind as he gets dumped? I think it was by Kimmo Timonen behind the Philly net. He cherry picks, comes down, and he just absolutely wires a clap bomb from between the dots and beats, I think it was Marty Baron at that point.
Definitely Baron.
But that was the same net. Wells Fargo Center, that end of the ice. And instead, on a 3-on-1, he doesn't go for the shot. He doesn't try to make the pass. He carries the puck behind the net and then says, let me set up my defenseman, set it back to the point, and we'll try to set things up. Now, is that structure? or is that Evgeny Malkin being non-aggressive? That's an important question. That's something that I don't think any of us on the outside are actually able to answer. And if people say they can answer it, there's a very select few people that I would trust and believe that actually know that. But on a 3-on-1, if anybody's coaching you to not take the shot and you're Evgeny Malkin, you should still take the shot, because at the end of the day, it's probably going to result in a scoring chance.
I will at least help you out here. It was at home, though. It was a home game that happened in. But
it wasn't?
Wasn't like the crowd going nuts for a reason?
Oh, maybe it was. Why do I feel like that was a road game?
You're good. I'm also trying to figure out the defenseman in it. And who'd you say it was?
I thought it was Kimmo Timonen, but
that's possible. I just kind of pulled up the box score. I was just trying to see if he was on that team to make sure. But regardless, no, it's definitely a home game because the crowd,
it was. He's in black. He's in black.
Crowd went ballistic.
Again, cold brain, but still, play suggests.
Exactly. And because you were bringing that play up and how he would have that sort of aggression, that's just walk in, free, slap shot when you don't really need to. You brought that play up, and I thought of another one from last year where I think because he's a little older and playing a little bit of a different game, that came to my head in a more negative context than yours. I'm pretty sure it was the same end, also still at home at PPG Paints Arena. During that overtime game against the Carolina Hurricanes, when he chased whoever it was behind the Hurricanes net, and they went down and scored in overtime. And that felt like a turning point of that season. And he took it upon himself. He said, I shouldn't have chased there. Mike Sullivan said right after, he shouldn't have chased there.
Yeah.
I think of that end there, and it's maybe there's a whole lack of aggression coming from Malkin now in these past couple seasons, and it's really, really, really rearing its ugly head 24, 25 games into this season.
Yeah. I mean, he rode a 3-game point streak going into last night's game, but there's just too often that you look at these games and you're saying, wow, man, Evgeny Malkin not only making no impact offensively, but he's really making a negative impact because his defensive game sometimes just falters. Now, last night, that's not on him. Everybody failed to play defense last night for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But back to the root of this conversation, I mean, you need Evgeny Malkin to get back on his horse. You need Evgeny Malkin to be the guy that he was last season when he scored, 83 points? In 82 games. He was over a point per game last year, because you look at what the first line is just attempting to do. The first line in goaltending, they're trying to win it on their own. I mean, that line has accounted for 53% of the team's goals since November 5th. 53% coming from 3 players. That's Crosby, that's Gensel, that's Brian Rust. And you look at the games that the Penguins have won over the past 3 weeks. There's only 4 of them. And look at how they won those games. Tampa Bay last week. Second line scores a goal. Fourth line scores a goal. Versus Toronto earlier, fourth line chips in twice. Versus Vegas, the fourth line chipped in and the defense scored with Ryan Graves getting a goal. Columbus is the one exception. In the last 3 weeks, they've won 4 games. Only one of them was won practically entirely by the first line. And that was the game against Columbus, where they scored 4 goals of the 5 total for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they won 4-3. So even if the second line doesn't score there, the Penguins win by 1. Like, they barely win, and that is with the first line contributing 4 goals. It's taken a toll on these guys. I mean, Crosby looked gassed last night. They need to get more scoring from around the lineup, because we said before the season it was top 6 scoring, bottom 6 defense. Right now it's top 3, all the scoring, bottom 9. Last night, what was it? It wasn't defense. It wasn't offense. It was just ice time. That's all it is. That's all it's been for a couple of different games throughout the past couple of weeks. They need more from everybody. And how do you place blame at that point? Like, at this point, it's like the entire team. I mean, at that point, it goes to coaching. We'll talk about it, but the entire team is just not where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I know you didn't want to necessarily dive too deep into this, but you bring up the goal totals from those lines, or that lack of offense from those other lines, and everyone is aware the power play is also not getting off scot-free here, and it deserves mentioning that. I mean, first of all, Penguins goalies have scored more recently than the
power play.
And the power play has. The penalty kill, I believe, has scored more recently than the power play. Or at least damn close to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting off scot-free here either, and they shouldn't, because of how many each of the Penguins' last or 7 of the last 8 or something stupid like that have been decided by a single goal. Whether it is one of their wins or one of their losses, it has been decided by a single tally. And legitimately, these missed opportunities on the man advantage are straight up costing them points.
Yep.
They were lucky to get out with two points. And let's be honest, they were lucky to get out with 2 points against Philly in those games. Pair of overtime. I mean, took Jake Gensel scoring in the dying seconds with the man up, but not a power play, just a different. It was 6 on 5, not 5 on 4. Different situation. It was a man up, but in no way, shape, or form does that equate to power play ability. You figured something out there. You got lucky to get that point out. Last night, Alex Nedeljkovic stood on his head, stole the show. Lucky to get a point out of that. Take it back to the Nashville game because that was their last loss. I mean, in hindsight, if you want to look at it glass half full, Penguins have points in 4 straight. If you want to. It's 1, 2, 3, trying to do quick math here. It's 5 out of a possible 8. So it's not awful, but it's definitely not where you want to be. And regardless, if you look at these 4 specifically, I mean, you got to win against win is against Tampa Bay. That's good, but let's say you get a power play goal against Nashville. Maybe things go a little differently. You get an extra point there. There's 3 extra points still sitting on the board there, but then you go back to the other 3 again. 1-goal games, 0 for 5 performances on the power play, and you're just missing opportunities after opportunities. You just get 1, and it's a different outcome. Erik Karlsson said the same thing. I believe it was after practice when he said, obviously it's not where we want to be. If we get it to 20% even, which is twice of what they're doing right now, if we get it to even just 20%, that's 1 for 5. We had 5 opportunities. We get the 1. We're in a different situation. That's all they need to do is just get that 1, and maybe things start to spin for them. But with, all these games being separated by a single goal and the power play not contributing, as much as, you need it separated by 1 goal. Yeah, get 1 goal from the second, third, fourth line, whatever it may be. Power play that's the point of it, is you have that man advantage. You need to take the advantage of that extra man, and they haven't done it. All these things, aside from the first line, really are to blame here. If you want to talk about defensive scoring, you absolutely can. Erik Karlsson is really carrying his weight. Offensively, he's doing fine. I think the defensive game has slipped a bit.
Yeah.
Well, it's something that we'll just kind of monitor for now because he's Erik Karlsson. I think he put a lot of focus on defense early in the season. He's flipped the switch, found a lot of offense. Ryan Graves needs no introduction again.
Ryan Graves needs a deeper dive right now because he is he's in the doghouse, and that's not a good thing for somebody who just signed a 6-year deal.
Yeah, and a defenseman getting used to the system takes longer than normal, but that's still I said it before. You're on the first line. You need it to be quicker.
Yep.
Crystal Tang's played great. I don't think the scoring has come for him, but it doesn't need to. He's played phenomenally defensively. And I mean, Ryan Shea's still looking for his first career point. John Ludwig has an assist. I'm not saying take them out of the lineup. They love John Ludwig right now, but I think P.O. Joseph deserves an opportunity when he's healthy to slip back in, see if he can bring something. But otherwise, someone's got to find scoring somewhere, and it's not coming from the first line. And as much as we like it, and much as it was awesome to see, it's not coming from the goaltending again, guys.
Yeah.
You got to find goals everywhere else in the lineup.
Yeah, and just to throw it back a little bit, you mentioned they got 5 of a possible 8 points over the past 4 games, and man, if they would just capitalize on 1 opportunity each game, they'd have 3 more standings points. That would put them tied for 3rd in the Metropolitan Division right now.
Yep, that is another saving grace too. Is that the Metro and the East is still extremely tight. They are so lucky that it is still extremely tight, and that and that the Leafs haven't broken away because they're in a wild card spot, are they not?
They're in the top wild card spot. That would put you, I believe, tied with the Leafs also for the top wild card spot. So even if you didn't have the tiebreaker in the Metro, you're right at the top of the wild card standings.
Exactly. So you don't look into the not the wild card, the thing you just said, the tiebreakers. Look into just get points, just collect points. And again, like I said, you've gotten points in 4 straight. That is a step near the right direction because they're all 3 of them are losses.
Yeah.
It's a step near the right direction. You're getting there. But again, one goal slips in, one bounce goes the other way on any of these lines in any of those games, you have a different situation.
Yeah. And yes, the bright side is you're not losing 6-0, but at the end of the day, with a lot of parity in this league means there's going to be a lot of good opponents that are coming up. You don't have any softballs, especially for the Penguins, who right now, one of the teams they struggle the most against is Ottawa, and they're at the bottom of the standings. So, it's a tough place to be for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're not playing pretty good hockey right now outside of the top line, who's playing great in the offensive zone. Their defensive zone stuff is kind of suffering. They were on the ice for both goals against last night, including an overtime missed assignment by Crosby and Gensel that, again, just looked like a brain fart. And it looked like, when you're tired, you make the wrong decision. And it looked exactly like what you mentioned last year from Evgeny Malkin. Sidney Crosby chases the guy after losing the faceoff, creates a 2-on-1. His man ends up scoring, which is Sean Couturier. But, there's a lot to work on for the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's a lot of players that could be playing a lot better, but they need to get some help, and there could be reinforcements coming, and that's where we're going to go with our next segment. Let's talk a little bit about the injured players that are making progress towards return. A handful of them have returned skating and resumed skating, and then more of them, not more of them, a couple of them are off the ice right now. We'll get back to that after this break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. Some good injury news for the Pittsburgh Penguins. If you're looking for positives surrounding this team right now, Rickard Rakell, P.O. Joseph, Chad Ruhwedel, all with the team, all 3 skating right now. Good signs for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who need help everywhere right now. Like, they're not getting great performances from most of positions on the ice. So getting players back like Rakell specifically would be big for the Pittsburgh Penguins, despite the fact that he has no goals in 17 games so far this season. So probably the biggest piece is Rakell, if they could get him back. Hopefully his struggles, when you look at him, were a mixture of bad luck early on and then injury late. Like, how early was he actually playing with an injury? Was it something that was actually new in that Vegas game, or was it something that had affected him a couple of games before then? Because I think there was a stretch before he went down. He kind of looked hopeless in the offensive zone, and my hope is that's because of the injury that he sustained, and he was trying to fight through
it. Yeah, you're right. I don't know how much he moves the needle, though, just because you're right. It's been some bad luck. He is obviously the biggest name to return to the lineup whenever he comes back and is fully healthy, and will be immediately supplemented back onto the second line, where he should be, no doubt. But honestly, that's just because we don't have too many other options to play behind him.
Yeah.
Especially on that right wing. So as of right now, yeah, he'll be the biggest name to come back. And who knows, maybe he comes back and finds the rhythm. Maybe he just kind of needed a little bit of time away. You never know. Everything can come back and be different. But as of right now, in my head, he's not going to move the needle too much, but it will be important to get him back, if for anything else, to get some of these AHLers out of the lineup.
Yeah, you obviously see the trickle-down effect of getting Rakell back, and we'll get to that in a second. But I feel like regardless of if he looks like he did earlier in the season versus, if he looks like he did last year when he put up 28 goals, I still think he is, like, nothing against Drew O'Connor, I still think he is better for Malkin. Because I think that he's able to capitalize on opportunities. Not that O'Connor didn't have a very nice goal against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not that O'Connor doesn't bring an element that I think is important to that line with Evgeny Malkin, but I just feel like Rakell, somebody of that talent, somebody that has that ceiling that Rickard Rakell has, is just a little bit higher than everybody else that Malkin has been playing with since he went down. And I think that's important to get back there. And I think that's important as well, because right now your other option is breaking up the first line. And I know Mike Sullivan doesn't want to do that, because that first line's been, as we talked about in the first segment, the best in hockey this season. So it gives you more options, because Rakell, if he's on the second line, if he's on the third line, he brings more talent. And right now the Pittsburgh Penguins are a team that could use as much talent as they can get, because right now it kind of looks a lot like the AHL roster is engulfing the NHL roster.
Yeah, and I know we said going into the year that, hey, there's plenty of AHL names that can step up in situations like this. It doesn't help that Andreas Janssen was among that list, and he is no longer here.
Yeah.
Vinny Hinostroza is here and doesn't seem to be getting the playing time. Some of the other names, Harkins was good until he wasn't. Colin White has not been given the opportunity.
Mark
Pysyk is, yeah. If we want to dig into the defense, Mark Pysyk is now in Calgary's AHL system. Libor Hayek, I don't think is even playing in the AHL right now. Forwards again. Sam Poulin's hurt. Valtteri Pussinen's still too young, I think. John Gruden's just not going to get a chance anymore.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe not too young anymore, but he hasn't been given the call. He hasn't been given the shot. Oh, yeah, Alex Nylander can't finish. We had all these aspirations going into the year with these AHL guys that, hey, they can all step up in certain situations. It's just not working out. Also, I think when we thought of them stepping up, we thought of them stepping up one at a time, not, hey, here are the two top. Here's the AHL top 6. Take it because we have no other choice. And that's just not, I think, what we expected. Mm-hmm. And I had another point at the beginning of what I was saying, and I forget what it was. So continue.
Yeah. When I look at the AHL system, I do think that there are some players that deserve opportunities there. Like Jonathan Gruden, obviously only gets called up when he scores seemingly like 4 goals in 4 games, and all of a sudden the Penguins are like, wow, he's hot, bring him up. And then they send him down hours later. But you look at some of the disappointing, performances from that group that you're mentioning. I think Jansen Harkins is the top name among them, but also, I'm not afraid to put Radim Zohorna in that as well. Like Zohorna made a massive impact when he was initially called up on the 5th game of the season, and he was great for the first couple of weeks. But what do we keep saying? Hey, this is phenomenal. He's been great. Looks like a diamond in the rough. Can he avoid the fall off? That's always been the question, because it's one thing to come up, be a flash in the pan, have great performances for a week or two. It's another thing to sustain that through an NHL season at the level that, the NHL is. Zohorna has struggled, and you see that in his deployment over the past couple of weeks. You saw that last night when he took a really bad penalty late in the game that fortunately didn't cost the Pittsburgh Penguins, because Lars Eller was able to make up for it and draw a penalty of his own. But Radim Zohorna has struggled. And that brings me to my next point. When Rakell comes back, because I think he's now missed 6 or 7 games, so he still has to mix a couple. I think he'd come back around the 14th, 15th, something of that date. That's when he'd be eligible to come back at least. When he comes back, I think it's clear and obvious that he should go to the second line, and it should be Rakell, Malkin, and Riley Smith. Obviously, that means Drew O'Connor drops down to the third line, which I think is great for Lars Eller. I think Eller has played fairly well. I think he's taken a step back simply because what is going on around him. Like it's hard as a third line center. That is your job, though. That, like, more often than not, a third line center sees more line mates changes than most other lines. So I get it, but you need to get a little bit more stability for Lars Eller. And I think getting Drew O'Connor on that line is a big part of it. But who do you put on the right side? Is it Zohorna? Because when those three were together, more often than not, they performed well. Or do you go somewhere else because Zohorna has struggled in recent weeks?
And this is going to be the $1 million question, is now all of a sudden, as we get healthy lineups back, we're going to start trying to cherry pick the best possible lineup. I don't think it's Zohorna anymore. I think playing 4 minutes and 52 seconds in total in the first game against the Flyers kind of speaks for itself. I know we played 9-something last night, but getting one shift in the third period of a close game. Was that his only shift in last night?
Oh, I thought that's what you were talking about.
I was kind of still stuck on Saturday's game.
Okay.
Still, I mean, getting one shift in on Saturday, however many he got on last night, don't know off the top, and my media site's been really slow today, so I don't know.
But also, also for that, we remember I asked you about it, and thankfully you sent it over to me, and I appreciate that. Radim Zohorna and Jansen Harkins didn't touch the ice after the Penguins took the lead in Tampa. They didn't touch the ice. They were benched. So if that tells you where Sullivan is at with Radim Zohorna, he's right there alongside Jansen Harkins right now.
Yeah, so it's that, and that should be enough of clarity to see that things aren't going to go well for Zohorna once people start getting healthy. And I know I just mentioned a bunch of names from the AHL system. I mean, my ideal lineup might feature Colin White because he's a name we haven't seen yet. at the NHL level. We know he can provide something. At least he proved it last year. He can provide something to a bottom six. Zohorna, by the way, he had a normal amount of shifts in the third yesterday. So
Okay.
There wasn't as much benching going on last game. But then again, I feel like because it was still a 1-goal game, or not a 1-goal, just a 1-1 tie game. It was tight the entire game almost. And then the entire third, you kind of had to continue rolling things over. Jeff Carter didn't play a bunch, though. Oh, that's nice. Anyway, we'll see where things go. I think Colin White could be a good option. I think if Alex Nylander can genuinely find some finishing ability soon and quickly, he should deserve a spot in the NHL lineup because he has a pedigree of that and can be faster and can be a skilled scoring depth option. Because again, defense is great in the bottom six, but God, you need scoring now. All these 1-goal games, you need a goal to be chipped in somewhere.
Yeah, especially because the second line has gone so dormant. Like when the second line goes dormant, that's when you need other people to step up, and nobody has stepped up to supplant them. And while I think it probably will end up being Zohorna, I think that's where they're going to go with it, especially, unless he completely plays himself out of an opportunity in the next handful of games, which is a possibility. I do think that they'll probably go with Zohorna, and I would probably agree with that simply because that's a combination that worked, and that's a combination that, hey, put them together, see if that lights a spark for Zohorna again, because he was a good player at the early portion of his most recent recall, and he's just kind of fallen off since then. Part of that might be, when you don't play with Drew O'Connor, that might be the key to unlocking Radim Zohorna and creating some space for him is Drew O'Connor being an absolute wrecking ball. So maybe that's what they go with. I think that's probably what they should go with, at least to start. But I would not be too sold on that unit. I would honestly like to see maybe, like you mentioned, an Alex Nylander get a chance, because I think last night, while he didn't have any prime scoring chances, while I didn't actually feel threatened that he was going to score a goal, at least it looks like he's desperate to score a goal. Yeah. Zohorna doesn't look like he's desperate to score a goal. Jansen Harkins, it doesn't look like he's desperate to score a goal. Alex Nylander, by the side of the net, got absolutely bulldozed and knew he was going to get bulldozed, but he still tried to put the puck between his legs, get a better angle on a shot, and try to get the puck on net. That's one thing that I think Alex Nylander does bring. Is one thing he has showed me, while the results haven't followed in his 9 games last year and however many games he's played this year, he's desperate to score goals. He's getting shots on net, and he shoots the puck well. Like, he has a good shot, and eventually you have to think that starts to go in more often than not. But, I do think that we're picking, between AHL players at this point. Like, you're hoping that they go above and beyond that level, but right now, most of the bottom six is playing at an AHL level of the NHL. Hence the reason we're in the position that the Pittsburgh Penguins are so reliant on that top line. So, Rakell comes back, there is a snowball effect, and hopefully it improves each level and each rung as the snowballs continue to fall. But, I do think that, especially on the forward side, the Penguins have a lot of issues that are not going to be resolved by one player coming back into the top six and moving everybody down. I think there's going to have to be a move made at some point here to bring in some supplemental scoring or bring in something to change the atmosphere in the top 12.
That's exactly what's going to take. Someone's got to find something. Whether it's Kyle Dubas going out to find somebody else, whether it's Mike Sullivan making a certain call from the AHL. I mean, I know it's not his call, but pushing Kyle Dubas in the right direction to make certain calls from the AHL. But also, you look at the AHL numbers, and boy, it's not fun. It's not fantastic. Ty Smith's leading the team in points, I think. So not that Ty Smith is a bad player. We all know he's great. There are just certain things that don't fit with the Penguins lineup right now. One of them being he plays defense. You don't have many options to even call up from the AHL. It's tough. And I know we all had high expectations for the AHL to be better. I think the assembly is still much improved, but it's much improved for the AHL. And again, we thought maybe they could chip in 1 at a time, 2 at a time at the NHL level. I mean, how many are we playing with right now? We just listed off Zohorna, Nylander, Harkins.
At least 4, maybe 5 at a time. Oh, no, Kapanen 5.
Yeah. Our 5 of our bottom 6 is our recalls or AHL level players. So it's tough. That's not what we expected whenever we said the AHL is going to provide a little more than they did last year.
Yeah, and when talking about the AHL, I think there's an important distinction to be made for everybody that just looks at the record and everybody that just looks at the statistics. And you actually sent this to me from Tony Andrikaitis, who covers Wilkes-Barre and also the entirety of the AHL.
Mhm.
The Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins have played the Hershey Bears a lot this season, and the Hershey Bears won the championship last year and are probably a championship caliber team this year in the American League. So, part of that is they're playing some of the best the AHL has to offer more often than they're playing anybody else. But at the same time, you look at the numbers and you wonder, hey, is that even something that's gonna translate, even though they're playing very good talent in the Hershey Bears more often than not? But that's something to dive deeper into at a later date. I just think a move needs to be made somewhere. And listen, I still have my hat in the ring for Josh Bailey. I think you agree with that.
Because there's no one else really out there free agent wise. Phil Kessel's there, but
no. Personally, no. Like, what is
exactly.
that going to bring? It's a little bit of scoring touch, but I don't know. I just don't think it fits, especially with the bottom six. But regardless, I mean, a change needs to be made. Is it a coaching change, Horwat? Because that's what we're going to talk about in our final segment. What would a coaching change actually do for the Pittsburgh Penguins? We'll talk about that after the break. Horwat, I don't know if it is because I am sick today, if it is because I'm not thinking clearly, so I'm just going to cut to the chase, though. Would a coaching change actually help the Pittsburgh Penguins? Let's parcel into this a little bit. Would a coaching change at the head coaching position? Everybody's talking about Todd Reirden. I get that. But would a coaching change in Mike Sullivan actually help the Pittsburgh Penguins going forward?
So without diving into the details of my genuine thoughts, I don't know if it would, because the team, the players, the way they are assembled, I believe, love playing for Mike Sullivan. Mm-hmm. I think when the coaching changes happened mid-season in 2009 and 2016, I think definitely with Therrien, I think there was just definitely more of a love-loss situation. They just didn't want to play for the guy anymore, but didn't feel they were going to have success with him anymore. Mm. I know they didn't win when they got rid of Bylsma because it was an off-season thing, but yeah, it just felt like Bylsma's course had been run. That's all. It was just kind of his time. And Mike Johnston, that was just a disaster for the Penguins. So they knew there was someone better to play for. Then Mike Sullivan stepped in and started winning immediately. I don't know if it would have that same. I just don't think it would have that same effect this time around. It's the team likes Mike Sullivan a lot. Mike Sullivan is a very smart coach, and I get the idea that that big of a change can have a profound effect and a profound change on a team. I get it. I don't see Mike Sullivan's change being viable this year. I don't know what it is. I don't know why is my thought. I know we're seeing something kind of go right in Edmonton right now after they fired their, based on winning percentage, winningest coach in franchise history. Jot that down. And they're seeing some sort of positive effect from that, but I just wouldn't see it happening with Pittsburgh. I don't know why. I just think the veteran guys, especially Crosby, Malkin, Letang, they like playing for Mike Sullivan. And if you really want to dig into it, moving Reirden now, it's going to be even harder, I think, because he has the defense's trust, and Letang especially. I mean, maybe not harder, but you get it's a tough business, and you get sometimes Kyle Dubas is going to have to make some tough decisions, but feelings are going to have to go out the window at some point. I just don't see it happening anytime soon, and I don't know if they'd be better. I don't know. Mike Sullivan's a great coach still.
A lot of people are doing the same thing you just did. They're looking back to 2009. No. A lot of people are doing the same thing in looking back to 2009 and 2016. But this is not the same situation anymore. In fact, The only thing that's the same is the organization and the 3-star players. Like, that's the only thing that is the same. But even that, the players aren't the same. Like, Sidney Crosby in 2023 is not the same person that Sidney Crosby was in 2016. Not to say that he's worse, because honestly, he's on pace to have his best goal-scoring year. He's on pace for over 50 goals this year.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not that he's bad, but these are different players. They're in their late 30s. 2009. That team was coming off of a cup final defeat. This team did not get anywhere close to that last year. And that team was underperforming through the entire early portion of the season. From top to bottom, that team was underperforming. Who is underperforming this year? The second line, and goaltending's been good.
The third line and the fourth line and the power play.
The penalty kill in the last couple of games. But how much of an underperformance is the third and fourth line? How much more scoring did you expect? How much more scoring did you expect from Ryan Shea and John Ludwig this year? How much more scoring did you expect from Marcus Pettersson or Ryan Graves this year? A lot of these players, they're not playing to their T, but when it comes to goal scoring, the second line is the only line that is drastically underperformed. So are you making a coaching change for one line? Maybe. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, because quite honestly, it might help. It might help because, as you mentioned, no matter how good a coach is, Dan Bylsma at the time was the best coach in franchise history. His message still ran stale. And whether they like him or not, Mike Sullivan's message may be running stale in the locker room. Hey, let's play hard. Let's play responsible. Let's make sure they'll limit the opposing team's chances, and let's take advantage of ours. When has that happened this year? Especially look at last night's game. Responsible hockey was not played in Philadelphia last night, at least not from the team that was coming from the road, right? So that's 2009. 2016 is probably a closer comparison.
Personnel was way better.
But exactly. They're coming off a near playoff miss, which means it's a little bit closer to this year when they missed the playoffs. They were one game from missing the playoffs in 2015. But they had a handful of players in the minors that not only came up and took that advantage, they had a handful of players in the minors that came up and were good NHL players, and 2 of the 3 have not left the NHL level. One of them is Brian Rust. The other one is Connor Sherry, who's had a pretty good career going forward from that moment. And the other one was Tom Kuhnhackl, who I still think is underrated, what he brought to that team to this day. But Tom Kuhnhackl, who in the minors, maybe Jonathan Gruden is Tom Kuhnhackl, but that's not the one that you're most looking for, right? You don't have the young players to come up and facilitate in the way that Sherry and Rust and go into 2017 and Gensel and the way that they were able to come up and contribute. You have nobody in the minors that's ready to come in and do that.
Because here's where things will start getting. Here's where things are going to get philosophical.
Okay.
Now, because whenever I immediately, as I said, they had better personnel in 2016. I guess it was still 15. Whenever Mike Sullivan was brought to the NHL level, they didn't. That team was not that great. It was Mike Sullivan that implemented that change of roster. And here's where things get philosophical. And then Jim Rutherford decided to start making some deals. He decided to start wheeling and dealing. Out goes Rob Scuderi, in comes Trevor Daley. Out goes whoever, unless no one really went out, for Carl Hagelin. 2009, Ray Shero. Out goes whoever. Here comes Chris Kunitz. Here comes Bill Guerin.
Ryan Whitney's going to be pissed.
Ryan Whitney, right. Knew I was forgetting it. Yeah. Out goes Ryan Whitney. It's solid, at the time, solid player. Top 10 draft pick. In comes Chris Kunitz, who ends up becoming a franchise icon almost. This time around, in the last few years, Ron Hextall wasn't making those moves.
No.
Kyle Dubas, fresh face in the front office. When you are a new face, especially in the front office, I know he's already done it. You want to make those, here's why I'm here decisions. Here's why I'm here trades. You already got one with Erik Karlsson. You had another with Riley Smith. You had it. It's kind of slipped. It's time to see one more, eh? I think if you're going to make a change, throw a trade out there. Not a big trade, but something to get the ball rolling, and maybe the big trade comes down by the deadline. Something's got to happen early here. And see where people are coming from with a coaching change. I know you're probably going to say that what exactly can we trade? I have a couple ideas.
Oh,
It's when it comes to getting the ball rolling, there's the idea that Kyle Dubas needs to do something here too, because it's going to be his decision ultimately. Whether it's a coaching change or a personnel change, it's going to come from the top. I don't see a coaching change working. Again, that's just me. Could be wrong. If you want to move out Reardon, it's weird seeing an assistant coach an associate coach get fired midseason. You don't normally see that. It is always just head coach and someone. This time around, I could see it being, or even if you don't fire Reardon because you want to keep him around for your defense, give that power play to somebody else. Let's start there. That's a bigger conversation for another time, and we're starting to run late here.
Yeah.
But if Kyle Dubas can go out and if it's him to make a change the players first, see what the coaching does after. Just because I still think, at least in Mike Sullivan's case, this coaching can still get it done.
I would, at the very least, I am of the same belief as you that a coaching change does not make all that much of a difference at this point in the season. It might. I'm not ruling out that it wouldn't, but I don't think it makes all that much of a difference at this point. I'd be more inclined to listen to that conversation if Rickard Rakell comes back, the chips fall in a little bit more of a natural position when it comes to the offensive lineup, and the same issues persist. Now, the power play is, I don't know who's in charge of it, but it's like you mentioned, it is a can of worms that goes from Reardon to Crosby to Malkin to Sullivan to Dubas to everybody in that organization at this point, because it is a complete and utter failure to not just succeed on the power play, but even set up the power play at this point. They were outshot 3-0 on a power play last night. That was ridiculous. But I think at the end of the day, what is it time to fire Mike Sullivan? I would say it's a bit premature still, but at the same time, I'm more and more as time goes on, I'm starting to listen to that conversation. It's starting to make a little bit more sense to me as time goes on, but I still think that it's not going to make and have the same result that I think people are expecting. And that's what I'm a little cautious about, is because people are expecting coaching change, Stanley Cup, because that's what we've been taught in Pittsburgh. Coaching change, Stanley Cup. That's what happens. That's what's happened in Crosby's career. I don't think it's going to have the same result this year. I don't think the result is going to be as drastic as it had in those past two instances. But it doesn't mean that it wouldn't help, and it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be beneficial for the Penguins. So the more time goes on, the more open I am to that idea, and the more it makes sense to me. But it still doesn't make enough sense if I was Dubas, I wouldn't pull the trigger on that yet.
It's still too soon. And once again, we just made it through that whole conversation, made it through however many minutes of that was, without me saying, hey guys, his new contract is still yet to start.
Yeah, I'm starting to care less and less about that. FSG is a pretty big financial entity.
You're right, but it's the way that it was signed by ownership. To fire Sullivan, you're going to have to now get ownership's approval too. It's not going to be just I mean, not that you didn't always have to, but it's not just going. Yeah, but it's not at this time around. It's not going to just be a GM just kind of giving a call. Hey, here's the move I'm doing. Slam phone. It is. Hey, here's the move I'm doing. You can slam the phone. They're calling you right back. This time around,
I don't know,
because it was their decision. You're going to have a longer conversation this time around. If Kyle Dubas really wants to go in that direction, it's going to be tougher to pull that Band-Aid off, because it was ownership's decision to keep him around. And again, like maybe FSG does feel that same way. Maybe they do feel, okay, we signed the guy, that's on us. But it's still going to have to go through them a little bit more than normal. And I get they gave Kyle Dubas a lot of props too, and a lot of responsibility as well, considering he is president and GM. Still, I mean, to what degree, we don't know. Mike Sullivan was also part of that search, sort of.
Yeah.
So I don't, again, until the contract starts, at least in my eyes, and I'm not saying it's ironclad. I'm not saying, keeping him around is an ironclad deal. Unless there's a clause in there we are completely unaware of, I don't see him going anywhere until that at least kicks in next year.
Yeah, and we could get into this probably for another 35 minutes, but
exactly.
When you say, Mike Sullivan has that contract, he signed it, it was a big vote of confidence from Fenway Sports Group. I look at what they gave Kyle Dubas, and I say, well, they gave him the power stick. They gave him a 7-year deal. They said, you're the president. If you want a general manager, have a general manager. If you want to be the general manager, you can be the general manager. Do things on your own time. Change whatever you want to change. Fire all these people from the Hextall era. Bring in all these people. Hey, you can go out and trade for a $10 million defenseman that's 33 years old. They gave him the keys to the kingdom. If he's going to say it's best for business to fire Mike Sullivan because this team is losing and the fan base is upset and it's a gate-driven league and that gets into a whole other can of worms, FSG is probably going to be inclined to listen. And I think that just as much as Mike Sullivan is their guy, Kyle Dubas is their guy as well. And they gave Kyle Dubas more power, at least on the outside in the hierarchy of the organization. But again, that is a conversation that we could have until the next time that they drop the puck in Tampa Bay on Wednesday night. That is a conversation that there's people on both sides of the island, and I get your point as well. It makes a lot of sense because the Pittsburgh Penguins have been heavily invested in Mike Sullivan since he won the back-to-back cups. It makes sense that he's a little bit more secure than your average NHL head coach, than whoever the heck his name was in Edmonton, whatever, the winningest coach in Edmonton history, who rode the coattails. Yeah, Jay Woodcroft, who rode the coattails of the best power play in the world to that record. Sure, but I get that it's a different situation, but I still think there's more to that situation than, they like Mike Sullivan, so they're not going to let anybody fire him. I think when they see the product on the ice, and I do think they're watching, contrary to some people's belief, when they see the product that's on the ice and they see their chances to make more and more money go out the window with this record going losing and losing and losing, they need to make the playoffs this year. I think that's when you see an issue there. So that's going to do it for this episode. We could talk for a long time on that one, but that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back on Thursday with a brand new episode, hopefully talking about a victory for the Pittsburgh Penguins in Tampa Bay. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.